Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose after difficulty. I'm your host, Donna Ferris, and today we have one of my favorite podcasters and a repeat guest, Colleen Dixon, with us. A little bit about Colleen. Colleen, also known as Cosmicolleen, is the host of the weekly Awakening Astrology podcast, where she not only deciphers the cosmic forecast, but provides relatable and humorous parenting advice and life wisdom, a combo that makes her podcast a must listen for me, and it should be for you. And I can't wait to get her take on what we can expect in the coming year. So I'm going to bring her right in. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us on Bounce Back Stronger. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Donna. I'm so happy to have you. That was a very nice introduction. And I love how you broke down my podcast. I was like, I should describe it like that. Do I describe it like that? So that was very nice. Thank you. And I'm happy to be back. And given what the forecast of what we can expect in 2025, I can't believe we're in 2025.
I think that's a good start. I'm still really struggling. I know everybody says it, but I'm really struggling with it being January and then also having to add the 5 on the end. It's just really, really odd.
And this is the coldest January we have had in years, right? And we've been kind of spoiled here, I feel, the last 3 years. We've had like 1 or 2 days of cold, and it's now like 3 weeks of almost below 30 temperatures. So we're all feeling a little bit blah.
And snow. We haven't had snow. And so I can't take my dog, poor little Jake, for those of you that listen regularly, poor little Jake cannot go outside because between the salt on the roads and just the cold, he's a short-haired dog, he's not getting his walks in. I'm getting my walks in, but he's not. So it's sad.
Aw.
I
Oh,
know.
that's sad. Well, soon the spring will be sprung again.
Let's hope for it. All right. Well, let's just jump right in here. How would you describe the astrological themes and influences for 2025? And are there any significant transits and or alignments we should be aware of? And just know this will probably air in February at this point. So just kind of keep that in mind that that's probably the timing.
Okay, sounds good. Well, there's a lot happening this year, a lot of big transits happening this year. And I was thinking about when you asked that question, what is the theme kind of the year? And this is a very strong Mars energy year. That means this is a strong action taking year. And sometimes it might be a little bit of a too much action. It's going to be fast action. It's not going to be soft action. It's just going to be like finally getting my butt in gear type of action. However, the second half of the year, we kind of go backwards, back to almost the fall of 2024 transits. All these planets ingress into new signs and a lot of fire energy, fire signs, and then they revert back into water signs. So there's like a much needed slowdown or pause of whatever we get started in the beginning of the year and whatever comes up. And then we'll all come full circle in January 2026. But again, like I said, this year is a very, very strong, intense year. So I'm going to read you some of the transits, okay? The big transits that are happening this year so everyone can catch up, and then we can talk a little bit more of the theme. So listen to this, guys. Like I said, a lot of Mars energy, a lot of Aries energy. And I want to remind you,
maybe take a second on Mars. Just like tell people, because not everybody's going to know astrology like you do.
Totally.
No?
It's good to stop me and give that reference. So Mars, all right, Mars, the male aggressive planet, the god of war. It's a malefic planet by nature. Now, that doesn't mean it's all bad, but by nature, it brings a very intense energy that can be hard. And there is good things that come with it, but its first nature is often war, to say the least. And that's one of the things we can have accept. We have benefic, positive planets, and we have malefic, harder planets that's their first nature. So with Mars, there tends to be aggression, war, fighting, fast talking, fast action, intensity, impulsivity, cutting, severing, ending. But let's remind everyone that's the good side is Aries begins the zodiac calendar. So there is a lot of rebuilding within that. And there's a lot of, like I said, fast action. So new things coming. This is a really great year for really new beginnings. I know we like to say that in January every year, but sometimes it's just not new beginnings. It's recycling the old shit, things like that. But this is actually year of new beginnings and new ideas launching. But Now let's go to the harder side of Mars. I feel like we're all sort of beginning this year with Mars retrograding. It started out in Leo, the fire sign, and then it retrograded back into Cancer, and it'll be there till the end of February. So that's the first thing. And I feel like this right now, it can be a little boo-hoo. Mars is debilitated, does not work well in the moon sign of Cancer. So there's a lot of us looking into our emotions and really seeing like, where is the detriment? Where is the shadow? Where is that hard stuff in us that has been holding us back, that's been stifling us or stopping at us? Or where's certain aggressive energy, and how do we need to take care of that? And even looking inside more aggressively as well within ourselves. But in general, there can be some boo-hoo. There can be almost like hurt feelings, sensitivities, family wounds coming up. There's a lot. So at first we're beginning a little sad. And I had talked about on my podcast last week, we have to like clear the emotional energy we've been holding on to, which Mars and Cancer is also doing at the beginning of this year, like severing, ending emotional things that maybe we've kept in us, but now they're building up with Mars and Cancer. So before we go into that new beginning right now, we're like shedding this emotional energy so we can open up energetically for all of the new beginnings.
Very exciting. Very exciting, but tough, but a tough period.
Tough. Mars teaches us how to be a soldier, how to go in war. And now we're sort of going to war a little bit with our emotions, going to war a little bit with our egos, right? We have this in Leo, and then it will station direct to move back into Leo. So a little bit of war within ourselves, and the good parts of ourselves will hopefully win that war and allow us to be free to start up new energy this year.
And maybe take one moment. One of the things that I'm just starting to kind of learn astrology, this shadow side of ourselves, so this dual aspects of everyone is an important part of astrology, isn't it? I think sometimes we don't think of it that way, that we don't embrace the shadow side. You talk a lot about that. Can you just take a minute on that? I just think it might be helpful.
Yeah, no, totally. We can absolutely take a minute on it. So the shadow side, I don't know if whether, I think it's all my Mercury. I enjoy to really go inward. I like to see my darkness. I know my flaws, at least all the ones I'm conscious of right now. And I'm sure there'll be many more throughout my life that I'll learn about. And I kind of find that journey very exciting and energetic. And some people don't like to go there because we all have our inner selves, our inner shadow selves. We're a multitude of energy. We aren't just one energy. You know, humans are very complex as the spirit, as the consciousness is within us. And we are multiple energies. That our shadow self, when we're kids, it usually is developed. I mean, sometimes it's just there, and we'll talk about that in astrology. We'll look at the placements, and like sometimes I like know certain shadows I've had for a very long time, since I couldn't even remember. So it's something that is inherently in me. But it grows over time. And I feel like in our 20s, 30s, and then again, it continues, then it never stops, the self-awareness, we start to get awareness into that. Like, oh, there's a voice telling me to do this. There's a voice telling me like, yeah, go ahead, you can do that. It's okay if you shake things up and it's really not good. There's also a voice that's an inner critic. That's also a shadow side of like tearing us down. There's all these little voices. And I think a lot of times people stuff it away, and we're going around 90% or 95% subconscious, right? But the shadow is within that subconscious, and until you make it conscious, you're acting out on certain ways. Now, our shadow never leaves us, so it's about understanding it. Progress, not perfection. Like the shadows often sides of us we're embarrassed about, we don't like. Sometimes maybe it didn't act in the best interest of ourselves and others. And each time that happens, we grow through that. Again, progress, not perfection, because I think our journey here in life is to spend forever evolving. So my shadow self, they're different. Like who I was at 19 was actually like kind of like not a very good shadow. Like it's embarrassing of the things at that point my shadow self had done. And then through work, through growth, through evolution, my shadow self now has much more of a moral compass, you could say, but it still comes up, and it's still other parts of me. It's not just like doing the right thing. It's other parts of my mind that like want to tear you down. Addiction, as we talk, is a part of my shadow self, right?
Yep.
And that's one that's always blatant. It's always sort of showing up. And so hopefully I gave you a long roundabout answer.
No, it's good. I like the idea of it as I was studying it because I think it's easy for us to get down on ourselves on not being perfect, on having those shadow sides and those aspects. It's important to embrace them, and not that doesn't mean that you double down on them, but you embrace them, that they are part of you, that that is something that you have to accept, and that you obviously work so that it's not driving the car, but it's okay to have it in the car, I think is important to say.
I like that. I love how you put that. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And we can learn a lot from that. I think and how we react in situations with that side of us can teach us a lot about what we need to work on.
And I will say my shadow self is often, I feel like, in cahoots or holding hands with my inner child. A lot
Yes.
of times the thing that happens when I really like, oh, who was that showed up in the moment? Oh, it's little Colleen, little
It's
13.
little Colleen, little, yeah, for me, little broken Donna. That little 4-year-old shows up. And it was an interesting, I had that conversation with Sharon Salzberg, actually. You know, one of her first things she said to me about how I was feeling about things that are going on now. And she said, well, it's really good to remember that you're not a child anymore. And the things that happened to you that made you react the way that you are gone, right? You're not still reliving them. And I think it's really important as we look at our shadow sides to go, that's what that is trying to protect us, but we don't need that anymore to that extent, like we did when we were 4.
Love that. Very elegant the way you put it.
Well, maybe we move on to what can we expect in terms of personal growth, reinvention, healing. Are there any placements besides Mars that will help us feel this energy more intensely?
Yes. Before I answer that question, I just want to go over real quick what transits are happening.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Idea.
Thanks.
So, like I said, we began the year with a Mars retrograde in the sign of Leo, retrograding back into Cancer, where it currently is right now. So, right there, we're going to talk about this Mars Aries energy. But this is all this year, all this Aries energy. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde in Aries that begins on March 15th, and it will retrograde back into Pisces. Then Venus will retrograde in Aries and then move back into Pisces. We actually have 3 retrogrades this year, all in fire signs. 2 of them, though, go back to water signs. And then we have the final eclipse in Aries on March 29th, a solar eclipse, and that will really finish up that eclipse season and any last endings in Aries. Then Neptune moves into Aries on March 30th. Saturn moves into Aries on May 24th, my birthday. And then they'll be there for a couple months. And then in this fall, they will both retrograde back into Pisces. Within that time, Saturn and Neptune, it won't be conjunct exactly until February, but basically they're going to be conjunct that entire time. There's only 1 degree off. So that's why I'm saying there's a lot of this fast stuff starting this year after this Mars retrograde. And then in the fall, we kind of revert back to this water. I feel like that's going to just get us in touch with ourselves again one last time. Something we need to come together a full circle with emotionally, with whatever takes off pretty fast. So there's a lot of bang this year. And then we have Uranus moving in June, moves into Gemini. And then again, in the fall, it retrogrades back into Taurus. So you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of oomph, beginning energy, and then a little bit of a slowdown and reverting back for whatever reason we will find.
Sounds like we'll need a break. Is what, that's what
I
that means.
think so, to be honest with you. That's what kept coming with me. Like whatever it is in the world as well in your personal life, it's like really picking up fast. There's a lot of action that we are going to start really feeling come March.
Wow.
March well into August. There's going to be a lot of action for all of us, and a lot of good things with that. There's going to be new businesses and new ideas and fast moving within people's lives and new romances.
That's a question that we want to get to, the romances. So let's talk a little bit about relationships.
As we know, last week the nodes moved into Pisces, the North Node, and wherever the North Node is, the South Node is automatically opposite of. At the degree and everything. So if you're looking online at a birth chart or some sort of astrological chart, then you'll just see the node in one place, because wherever the North Node is, The south node will be exactly opposite at that same degree, for those of you who don't know. So the nodes move in, which begins the eclipse season. That's going to really be taking off in the fall of this year. But a lot of stuff is happening in Pisces in the spring, a lot of romance. So this year, the two biggest romance players are going to be Virgo risings and Pisces risings, because this is happening in your house. These eclipses, which will now be happening for the next 18 months, are happening in both of your house of marriage, the seventh house. And it doesn't just mean marriage. That's what we always called it. But now it's the house of partnerships, the reflection of another. This is going to be a time where a big relationship, if you're in one, can end or transform in some way, and a new one can begin, or you're going to see the droppings of a new one beginning. Those are going to be the biggest placements for that.
Wow. Big year.
Big. Pisces have a big year, and they've been since Saturn has been in Pisces. And that's also, to add to that, in general, my mutable signs are going to have a big year as well this year, with all the Pisces and all the mutable rising. So that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. The eclipse seasons will begin in your big houses, right? The first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 12th, your angular houses. So there's going to be a lot of shifts within that, with career, like you had said, life path, life purposes, home, your friendships, but more like those really tight friendships, business, your ideas, and within yourself and who you are now, and maybe even some aesthetic changes. The biggest people I think this year having a lot of the big years are going to be your cardinal placements, especially Aries, and your mutable placements are going to have the biggest year, where I feel like the last couple of years, it's been a lot of fixed energy. It's been a lot of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius. Now we're like sort of shifting away and having a lot, and the mutable sort of always has been there, especially since Saturn entered Pisces. But I'm definitely ready. And I know a lot of people with mutable energy are ready for Saturn to like move out. It's time to get into Aries. We're over it in Pisces. It does, again, it retrogrades the second half of the year for about 3 months back in, but then it's gone for 30 years. So it has been tough for a lot of mutable placements the last 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Virgo, so I get it. I do get it. What about career advancement? Where do you see that showing up?
So Sagittarius and Gemini, that is going to be where it's playing out in your house of career, especially in both of those placements are going to have the big shifts in career, as well as like life changes, life story changes, plot line changes. And I think Aries will as well, especially Aries suns.
Yeah, there's so much going on in Aries.
There's a lot happening in Aries, and especially Aries suns. And when we look at our career, when we look at our life plot, when we look at the chapters of our life, we go to the sun. And so Aries suns are going to have a ton of stuff happening, a ton of stuff beginning, and in a more serious way. Like I feel like for my Aries who are beginning things in my Aries placements, you're going to have that structure from Saturn, which is going to be nice. Like, like, okay, it's time to get your shit together.
Get serious. Get serious.
Get serious.
So what about global shifts or things that the world stage will offer? Anything there that you want to, I mean, you hit a little bit of that on Mars in the Mars discussion up front, but is there anything that we should be aware of?
You know what? There's a lot happening in the world, and I wish I could give a better prediction here, because I think we want all to say, okay, it's sunshine, the world's going to go back to normal, everything is great. But no, we're in a clash of worlds in a lot of different ways. The reason why it's interesting you said there's going to be more worldly connections is because the outer planets, just like what happened with COVID, when a slow moving outer planet changes signs, it sort of disrupts the collective at a new way. And so there was at the end degree of Pluto back when COVID happened, was at the 29th degree, conjunct Jupiter. And we saw COVID, we saw everything kind of blast off. And then we've watched Pluto go back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. And so there's a lot of shifts happening. So we have all the outer planets in this last year have all made major shifts, which means the world energy is in a big change. So I will give you my report, but don't shoot the messenger. I sometimes I hate this because some people are like, I want everything positive, but unfortunately that is not the world we have created right now. That is not it whatsoever. And you got Pluto now in Aquarius for good. All right. This year, you have Uranus moving into Gemini. And then you have Neptune, right? These all planets have been there. Neptune's been there since 2011 and Uranus since 2018 in those two signs. You have Neptune moving into Aries. So there is a lot of big global shifts. I'm going to start with the bad. And then I'll go with the good with this, some of the innovations, because the biggest thing is going to be, and with that Aries, is war. Now, I'm not saying we're going to World War III. That's not what I'm saying. I actually think there's going to be multiple kinds of wars and not just necessarily your definition of a traditional war. Now, one of the great things about astrology is that we have an ephemeris, which goes back 10,000 years, where what sign every planet was in. And so we know the history of the outer planets over the last 300 years. We know all of that. So I'm going to read you some history. So the last two times Uranus was in Gemini was in 1941 to 1945, the World War II. And then in 1861 and 1865, the US Civil War. That was when it was in there. And then also Uranus and Gemini in 1774 and 1782, the American Revolutionary War. The last time Neptune was in Aries was when we began the Civil War in 1861 to 1875. And then as well as Pluto in Aquarius was around the Revolutionary War time too, and a lot of wartime. So right away, unfortunately, doesn't mean that World War III is happening, but we see a war amongst so many things already. So with Pluto in Aquarius, it's almost very futuristic wars. I think we're going to continue to see, like we saw the CEO get murdered, right, by someone randomly. I think I don't think people are going to go out there shooting. I hope not, though it is a violent world now. But I think we're going to see more of like people going to war with the billionaires, the millionaires. People now are in a state where they don't care anymore. They don't fear anything. So I think we're going to see these multitude of wars between the rich, the poor, the Democrat, the Republicans. I think all of these things that we have created, mostly a lot of it has really happens in social media in a lot of ways too. You know, all of these separate groups we are now created, we're no longer connected. When COVID spread us even more apart in so many different ways, that I think there's just going to be all these different levels of war within everyone. That's what I see. Now, the good thing, right, within that, because I think Pluto in Aquarius is always going to be leveling out. If you know any Aquarius, and I think this might be you a little bit too, you have an Aquarius moon, is that they always kind of root for the underdog, right? Like there's something in Aquarius, they want fairness, they want equal, they want everyone to be right, they want all rights for everybody, and they also like the difference. So the more sort of different, the more they're protective of certain things. So I think there's going to be, over time, this shift where we become more connected. You see people now not idolizing Hollywood. I think that's going to continue to crumble. For so long, we spent, when Neptune was in Pisces, we've spent a long time valuing and sort of putting an illusion over like money and people with money. You know, the Kardashians blew up then. All of those things were now, I think, Pluto moving into Aquarius, and a lot of Aquariuses are very minimalist. They don't actually really need a ton, are going to be very like, we don't want that. Like, we're not worshiping that anymore. You can't pull the wool under our eyes, as we're seeing Neptune now. We're at the end of Pisces. We're all like, wait, the truth is coming out over the last, especially even the last 15 years. The truth of everything is starting to come out. So I think when Neptune moves into Aries, a lot of raw truths that come out that we're already, and that's what's going to start some wars. Like, how dare the healthcare been, robbing us of this? How dare the millionaires have been lying to us? So that's the harder stuff.
Oh, so what's the good stuff? Because it's scary how much you through the astrology are confirming a lot of things that I fear. It's just frightening.
Well, here's some good things. Like we had talked about ahead of time, I think that a lot of us have reached our mental max on social media. And not that that's ever going away, but I think we're now going to start valuing in-person relationships again. I think we're becoming less and less of social media, especially as they've controlled us, and you have algorithms and you have things like that. And we're all kind of like what is this? It's bullshit. And again,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we watch people for what they have online. So as we move away, I think from that minimalist, we're going to go back to like deeper connections. Now, and I know that was one of your questions too, with the connections though, there is going to be other weird worldly connections that grow. So there's going to be these people, maybe you'll find more communes, more festivals. I know now they're opening bookshops where like there's no Wi-Fi. So I think you're going to find a large group of people wanting to disconnecting from
Mm-hmm.
the news, disconnecting from social media and getting back
Yeah.
to the world. So I think that's going to be a really positive, beautiful shift. But I think people who go online and stay online, it's going to get even weirder. You know what I mean? Like it's already
It's
weird online. And I think,
already really weird.
yes, people who spend 24 hours consumed online are the majority, or that's where they search for their connection. I think that's going to get kind of weirder. I think you're going to see these two advances. I think you're going to see people getting weirder online with like virtual reality connections, and then people going back to like 1996 for connections again. So that I'm looking forward to and hoping. I also think with Uranus moving into Gemini, there definitely will be some erratic, maybe mental health crisis that you're going to see. However, I actually see there being surprising advances in mental health because
That would be
I go
good.
to yes, because I go to the mind when we go to Gemini and things happening in Gemini. Now, Uranus is traditionally a malefic planet, but it can bring like advances. It can bring some good things. So I think there will be a lot of growth. I also think there's going to be a lot more acceptance around mental health. Same with Pluto and Aquarius. I think there's going to be more acceptance, more understanding, more treatments, more ideas of how we work. I just think that's going to boom. I think that we're going to see money and a lot of things go into mental health
That'd
over
be
this
awesome.
time. Yes, I do think that's going to be positive. I also think people are going to be working harder again. Not that I think we need to slow down, but I think sometimes there's been this generational shift of also just like being lost. And with Neptune and Pisces, Neptune moving out of Pisces into Aries, I think there's going to be a little less generations that are lost and more like I'm ready to take initiative. And I think we're going to be building new allies with other countries, and some might surprise us who we build allies with. And we are going to, again, like see a lot more truce in America that I think down the road will lead to freedom. So my thing is, if you're worried and you're worried about the future, join the collective that like get offline, get off news, seek out internal connections, try to find people that do that and build the collective in that way.
Very well said. I love that idea. From a person who actually bought an iPad so that I could be off social media. I could put my book on there, I can put my Netflix on there or whatever, and not look at social media or other things at all.
Good.
Yeah, because it's just really tough now. It's hard for me to be off of it because of the podcast, really. But yeah, and I do have some people that I really like to connect with there. But
You know
yeah,
where I hate and where the trouble is, and that's why I try to work with my kids is I notice I do it, but I'm just and I'll put my phone down, like don't do it. Like all of a sudden, what does our hand do when we have a free thought, a free moment? Oh, let me just scroll on Facebook. Oh, let me just check Instagram. And
yep,
even if it's for 5 minutes or 3 minutes, you're still doing that how many times a day? And I hate that that's my first reaction
yeah,
still
yeah,
sometimes. And I try to pause to be like, no, Colleen, just sit and look around the room, right? What'd you do before? Like, don't just scroll because all that stuff just opens up a whole new vessel in our head. I think that too. I think we're going to see a lot of like, because that's happening, there's going to be much more work with psychologists, psychiatrists, the government realizing like, whoa, like we've all let computers control us and a mind
that's
control
right.
us and whatever we want control us, whatever's online.
Yeah, and it goes back to the minimalist idea, like the simplicity is better. So many people have so much trouble, and I do too, being silent and not having anything to do, where if you think of our ancestors, they had tons of time to not do things. So they did creative things, or they hung out with their families and played games and things like that. And we've just lost a lot of that, I think, because of the phones, because of technology. Yeah, and I love technology, don't get me wrong, but the person to blame is myself, right? I'm not managing it the way I need to manage it for my health and safety.
Well, you know what got me really thinking too is raising kids in this world.
Yes,
They
I
have
imagine.
iPads. They don't have phones yet, but they do have an iPad. And even just taking that away, and then I'm trying to tell them slow your brain down, slow your brain down, read, meditate. I'm always like, I don't let them do anything in the car. We just listen to music and look out the windows. I try to do that.
Awesome.
And then I'm like, wait, like I'm doing that. And I do have more pauses than they do naturally, but I'm still like, what's my brain next? What's my brain next? And I'm like a wandering head. I used to love to, I grew up in the country, just sit there and stare for hours. I would lay in the grass and my brain is like, what's next? What's next? And we've built a world where everyone is so overwhelmed, which came crashing down at COVID. We saw with just like, and more so now, 1,000 people can get in touch with you at any given time when just 12 years ago, it would be through email, text. There wasn't all the time. And I think everyone is just boom, boom, boom. We're all exhausted, but really because of social media, I think number one.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, I'm glad that I can reach my kids, but remember, our parents couldn't reach us easily, right? It was a thing. You didn't have a phone necessarily, and you certainly didn't have an iPhone. So, yeah, it's really interesting. And we got along fine. I mean,
You know
we
what
did
I
okay.
is that now, and I'm sure I'll probably, my kids are teenagers, track, but I don't track anyone and I don't want to be
I
tracked.
don't
No, I don't
I
even
don't
have my
track
kids'
anybody.
iPads on trackers. And I'm
My
like,
my daughter tracks me.
well, that's it. Well, that's the funny thing. These younger generations, and they're all tracking each other. Like, so all my girl clients that I have that are young, they're all telling me like, and there's drama there. They're like, oh, well, so and so, I saw that she was at my friend's house and she didn't tell me, and she's this, and then she didn't let me see her location. I'm like, all this drama because now all these high school kids are all tracking each other. If you have 50 friends, 50 people know where you are at all given.
Ugh, I don't want that. I don't
No,
want that.
no,
No,
that stop.
no, it has to stop. That's scary. That's scary. Well, as I'm looking at the time, because I know you have to go, what did I miss? Like, what should I have asked, or what do you want to share about this upcoming year, which is astrologically, pretty much showing up exactly the way I thought this year was going to go. So that's pretty fun.
Well, I will finish up with the retrogrades, which kind of ties into the energy of starting new with all this Aries energy. All the Mercury retrogrades are beginning in fire signs. We have the first one beginning in Aries and then retrogrades back into Pisces. And then we have one in Leo, a retrograde, but that stays the whole time in Leo. And then at the end of the year, we have a retrograde that begins in Sagittarius, the fire sign, and retrogrades back into Scorpio. So just like I added with Mercury, that is the planet of our communicator, our writer, our thinker, our doer. It is the mind. It is how you get your mind in shape and do things. So with this is going to be really where the power comes from within whatever we rebuild, whether it's a new creative idea, whether it's a new job title at work, whether it's a new job, whether it's actually doing something with your spirit and getting your spirit going, whatever that is, those are going to be when we actually find the structure. Now, mutable energy, right? Mercury, a very mutable sign, the ruler of Virgo and Gemini, is always moving. It's always thinking. So traditionally, a lot of Mercury retrogrades, if you listen to my podcast, I always say Mercury is teaching you how to be mutable. That's why when all the mishaps happen and the annoyances, they almost always work out afterwards. But in that moment, it's teaching us, hey, you need to be flexible here. Hey, you need to change your mindset here. Hey, this isn't so bad if you change your thinking, changing your thinking, being more flexible. That's traditionally what that is teaching us. Now, it is teaching us with that. However, I feel like it's teaching us sometimes we can be maybe a little too mutable and a little too flexible, that we're wandering around and not really knowing how to take these steps. So this is going to teach us within there the flexibility, but more so bringing structure into that flexibility to get the results we want. And so while it's in fire signs, there's a lot of that taking action. And then reverting back into the water, which is really where I feel like a lot of our creativity holds, especially that internal intuition creativity. The mental creating is up here, but that intuitive creating, that's where it's going to teach us how to get something done with an idea, with a relationship, with a conversation, and how to run with it. That's going to be the real where all of this work really plays out for us and where we get the right mindsets to continue building what we're going to be building this year.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. It's always good to be with you.
So thank you. Thank you.
So that's all for today. If you want to learn more about Colleen's podcast, or if you're interested in speaking with her to get an astrology reading, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, please subscribe, drop a review, or share it with your friends and family. That's the best way to get it in the hands of those who may benefit. And if my daughters Sienna and Sylvie are listening, I want you to know how proud I am of you. And I love you so, so much. Bye now.